In preparation for this assignment, as a class, and rather as a smaller group, we discussed some of the things that typically approach people when it comes to the issues of cultural dynamics and differences between culture. And obviously having Julia in our group was very interesting to see the difference between something like an American, or in my case a Sicilian culture, and a Bangladesh culture. In Bangladesh culture, according to Julia, it's very common for people actually to be absent and to show up hours late for an event, and for some events to last multiple days. And for me, this was quite interesting because, in contrary to my culture, which is mostly Sicilian, it's expected that people are either 15 minutes early or actually on time for a particular event. So to see the differences in culture was, suffice to say, a little shocking. And to be honest, I guess in some cultural contexts it wouldn't be considered disrespectful. However, in this particular context, for my culture, for example, it would be disrespectful, whereas for Julia it would be completely normal. And so it got me to thinking, and really the entire group, why does nonverbal communication such as timing and the way that we respect other people's time, just as a simple example, matter? Well, simply put, international students have already expressed that the differences between cultures makes a huge difference in how they perceive not only each other, but how we interact with culture and who we are as people. Students that have traveled have shared their struggles, and they'd wish they had known what to do. And at the end of the day, we all want to be shown respect and love, and as Christ followers, we should try to love and honor people in that way. So understanding cultural context and differences is something that, as a whole, we should do not only to help others, but to improve our witness in Christ and to make sure that we're honoring everyone with our time and our intention.
I had the opportunity to travel to Africa in 2016 for a 2-month missionary trip. Prior to the trip, I had 3 months of training in California with my trip team, where we focused on character building and learning more about the heart of God. For me, it is very interesting to think about during that time how we did not have an emphasis on nonverbal communication or communication with a different culture in general. We had some speakers from different countries in Africa come in and show us parts of their culture, but as a team traveling as a whole, we did not focus a lot on nonverbals. Recognizing and interpreting nonverbals will be very valuable. I think there's only so much you can learn about a different culture from being in your own culture. There is only so much that you can prepare for. Actually, immersing yourself in that culture is a way to learn. Although this is the case for the most part, I think for a missionary purpose, having lessons on nonverbals can help with spreading the gospel efficiently and effectively by forming relationships with the people in the different countries through mutual trust. When we were there, we would sit down with locals and talk. In the article Intercultural Misunderstanding in South Africa, an analysis on nonverbal communication behavior and context, the author, Cynthia, who is a senior lecturer of African languages at the University of South Africa, expresses that due to the segregation in South Africa, the apartheid, the racial groups caused the different behavioral norms within the areas and people. In the article, Cynthia points out some white employers in South Africa still find it difficult to understand why their African employees avoid looking them straight in the eye during a conversation. But what they don't understand is that from an African cultural perspective, it is regarded as disrespectful to gaze at someone if he or she is of a higher status. It is also impolite to look senior persons in the eyes when speaking to them. With the nonverbal aspect of my trip, the thing that stands out to me the most when I reflect on it is when we first arrived in the village. We had to gain support from the chief of the village. To do this, thankfully, the long-term missionary told us to greet her with not just the normal handshake. We had to go in to shake hands, but also place our left hand on our wrist as an extra step. And you would do this to show honor. Before going on the trip, we did not learn a lot about greetings. So it would have been really valuable to have to do a lot of research during those 3 months and potentially write a research paper as one of our assignments and share our findings with our traveling team to learn and grow with each other. I can say with confidence that going into my missionary trip with more knowledge of honor, greetings, and the history of South Africa would have been something that would strengthen our interactions in the areas.
In research, we found that each culture has their own cultural norms, that is, a set of various ways of communicating that are specific to their own culture. Yvonne Chang did a study on cultural norms and nonverbal communication. He found that cultural norms are embedded in a community's daily interactions. Through simple observing and knowing how to observe, we can expect to identify the underlying cultural norms. In studies completed, it has been shown that understanding a culture's norm before visiting the country provided one with a greater confidence when going. When we go on a go trip, it's important to have knowledge on the cultural norms of the country we're visiting because it provides the community members, along with yourself, guidelines for behaving competently. Cultural norms function as a symbolic resource that members draw upon to regulate others' behaviors and to make judgments. Finally, they create order in a community. For example, in many cultures, shaking hands shows honor and respect and attributes power to a person. However, shaking hands can be done differently in many cultures as well. Cultural changes are shown through the changed attitudes or responses members have towards certain nonverbal behaviors. It's also important to understand the difference between a high and low context culture. Point Park University published a study and information on both high context and low context cultures. They found that high context cultures such as South America, Africa, and Asia rely on elements related closely to relationships, social hierarchies, and cultural knowledge. Their communication is indirect and understated. Individuals are expected to speak one after another in an orderly and linearly way. One's physical space is considered to be like a community space. It's okay to stand very close to one another as it's a common practice. While those in low-context cultures, such as Germany, Australia, and America, rely on the heavy use of words and direct communication. Relationships grow more quickly and social hierarchies aren't shown as important. Communication is linear, dramatic, and open. Words, again, are highly valued and used often along with privacy and personal space being something of value. Unlike in the high-context cultures, physical space is considered privately owned. When going on go trips with a team here at Cornerstone, it should be required to gain a greater understanding of the context of the country you'll be visiting to ensure that communication, both verbally and non-verbally, and building relationships is done effectively. Facial expressions can help accurately interpret the meaning of nonverbal communications. Facial expressions all across the country can be a huge indicator of how one is feeling. The face is the only system that will tell a specific emotion that is occurring. Facial expressions become automatic and are said to be more reliable of a person's emotional state of being than languages. According to Paul Ekman, you can learn about many facial expressions in an hour on specific websites. In another study done by Friesen, expressive displays beneficially help one understand how another person may be doing in a specific setting. It was considered much more valuable to be briefed on this knowledge before visiting with people who have no prior understanding. In this study, it was shown that the relationship between the two became more personal and each of them became more reliable when understanding each other. This hour of study can help a go tripper gain highly beneficial information on how to tell how one is doing. For example, if somebody is angry, their facial expression will be similar to this: thin lips, low eyebrows, and raised eyelids. If somebody is fearful, they will have raised eyelids, tense lower eyelids, and eyebrows that are raised and drawn together. And then happiness, the most universal facial expression, is indicated by a smile and crescent-shaped eyes. Winking is a facial expression that varies a lot. In Latin America, winking is considered to be romantic, and for the people in Nigeria, they wink at their children if they'd like them to leave the room. Additionally, in the Chinese culture, winking is considered to be rude. While facial expressions can't specifically tell us what is generating an emotion, it can certainly help to understand when one is feeling an emotion, whether it is happy, sad, confused, angry, or one of the many other emotions we experience daily.
I personally think that go trips are a great benefit for students who are seeking more different cultural exposures. However, the emphasis on nonverbals should be required for students before they are exposed to different cultures. Especially in any field of studies, global exposures enhance the knowledge and the ability to understand people and communication skills from different backgrounds. From my personal experiences, I learned that understanding different cultures in society helps you in the future where you must communicate with people from different cultures and adapt to their ways and traditions and behaviors. I am an international student from Bangladesh, and I'm currently involved in a global exposure where I am studying in a different country with a totally different cultures and traditions. I believe that knowing and learning nonverbals before the go trips or any global exposure are a necessity because it helps you to be respectful to the culture and the people of that country. In countries like Bangladesh and India, certain aspects of the body language is highly noticed in a culture. For example, shaking hands or receiving and giving something with the right hand is a must. This shows that you value the person and you are aware of the respect it shows. Furthermore, when there are elders around, you wait for them to sit down before you get seated. Not only that, you are never to cross your legs while sitting when they are around, the elders are around. And this shows that you are aware of their presence and you highly respect them. So these are some of the nonverbals that students or anyone should know before they travel or go trips, like especially in areas like East Asia. But I'm certain that there are other aspects of nonverbals of other countries students and people should be aware of before they travel. Having seminars or group get-togethers before go trips I think is very important because this will not only help the students learn about the culture of that specific country, but also help them to be respectful to the culture they're exposed to. For example, when I was living in Bangladesh, I had the privilege of studying in an American school where I learned the behavioral patterns and traditions of the Western culture. This enhanced my learning and viewing of the American traditions and the American culture differently than what a typical Bangladeshi would view. For example, time maintenance is a huge nonverbal that I learned before coming to the States. People of Bangladesh are culturally more laid back on time. An example would be that they're never on time and always showing up late for everything. And as a nonverbal communication, I learned that time is one of the most important subject that Westerners value, and it shows high respect of people and their time when you are concise about their time maintenance. So for go trips, it would be important to learn about the country's time orientation and to be better prepared for the culture.
So in summary, nonverbal communication matters to others because you say more with what you do than what you're actually saying. And I think this is really important to understand because at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want, but it has to be backed up by actions in order to truly leave an impact on people. Creating the habit of understanding other cultures makes us not only better guests, but it also makes us better servants. And spiritually, this is incredibly significant considering we want to leave the greatest impression possible, especially on something like a go trip, where we're intentionally going out to serve people for Christ. In summary, you can also express this through what Scripture has to say about it in Proverbs 25:11, which says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver." God truly does have a heart for healthy and appreciative communication, which I think is something that we should all consider, especially on something like a go trip where we're visiting a culture where they communicate completely different than we do. And it's incredibly important for them to understand that we care about them just as much as Christ does. Thank you so much for listening.